Bone Spirit get an incredible buff and will be the strongest build this season, but it stings for leveling. Therefore, let me provide you with the Bone Spear 1 to 60 into Bone Spirit endgame level experience. What happened to Bone Spirit that made it so much stronger? One, we get a new aspect, Shattered Spirit, that now when you cast Bone Spirit, also cast 18 Bone Splinters that go out and shotgun style explode everything around you, generating essence for units hit. So if you hit 10 units, you get 60 essence back and straight away can cast another Bone Spirit almost at max capacity. Which brings us to the second change. Bone Spirit does 1% more damage per point of essence up and cast. Doesn't sound like a lot, but if you cast with 100 essence, that's 100% more damage. And Bone Spirit has already been doing millions of damage exploding. You could do a 10 million damage, a 20 million damage exploding with Bone Spirit. Well, now you get 100% more damage. And lastly, there's a tiny change where it now restores 30% of your essence on hitting enemies instead of 30 essence. That one can be made to be even higher. More to that later. We're going to split this into 3 steps, 1 to 35, 35 to 60, and then 60 into endgame. There's timestamps in the description below, and yes, there's also one for the gameplay loop happening after the 1 to 35 part to show you how to use your skills there, and then also for the endgame build, which is quite different. First 1 to 35, which is 45 points to use, with a bonus 10 points from Renown. Bone Splinters is our essence generator with enhanced Bone Splinters and also Acolyte's Bone Splinters for the bonus critical strike chance, because critical strike chance is what we do. Then straight up into Bone Spear with enhanced Bone Spear and also paranormal Bone Spear for even more crit chance. Honestly, the vulnerable we won't need because that's what our companion is going to do. There's a timestamp for the companion too, but we'll get to that. Now we are using our warriors until level 35 because they're super useful and help you to just level faster, especially in World Tier 2. First, appointing Corpse Explosion with enhanced Corpse Explosion, and then 1, 2, 3 points into Skeletal Warriors, which also gives us Iron Maiden. And Iron Maiden, together with enhanced Iron Maiden, now gives us 5 essence on cast, making it easier for us to go Bone Spear, Bone Spear, Bone Spear, Iron Maiden to get our essence back, Bone Spear, Bone Spear, and then rinse and repeat on every pack of mobs to just never stop. Before you ask, we're going for skirmishers into additional skirmisher to just have the front line going on that clips and claps units to give us world record level speed. Next 2 points want to be Grim Harvest and Fueled by Death to give us essence back as we raise skeletons, but also if we Corpse Explosion something, we get bonus damage plus even more essence. Next point into Bone Spear, because that highs our damage the best, goes from 85% to 94%. Generally, bringing this skill up to level 5 is always going to be where most of your damage is coming from. Now you could say, Pony, we could already go for Bone Spirit, but it is a bit clunky to use early, especially without the aspects getting the most out of it. And your skill bar is already getting full because we get the Raised Skeleton, we get the Bone Splinters, Bone Spear, Corpse Explosion, and Iron Maiden happening. There is a point for Bone Spirit, but something else will take its place at level 25. We could start putting fancy points in Serration and such, but to be fair, the most damage you get is by just pumping this up to level 5 as fast as possible. First, to increase your damage and make this more reliable, it's best to just put the 2 points in Grim Harvest and the 2 points in Fueled by Death. That's the end of the day where we're getting the most out of. And then the next 3 points are also landing in Skeletal Mastery. Yes, do ignore this down here. We're not going to be dabbling with this right now. With 26 points spent, we are at level 17. 10 from the Renown, 16 from Levels, which needs us to put 1 more point in a little bit of attack speed. And then we can already use our Skeletal Mages at 18. 15, you can summon them already. But now they're Cold Skeletal Mages, which give us 2 essence on their primary attack. Then Bone Spear, Bone Spear, Bone Spear. Have your mages restore your essence with Iron Maiden, Bone Spear, Bone Spear, and in between the Corpse Explosions to help you too. 7 more levels to 25, 7 skill points being put down. That is 2 in Inspiring Leader for the maximum attack speed, 3 in Golem Mastery, that's 5. Then there comes another point into Amplified Damage because cursed enemies take more damage, and that works against everything because we always curse. And then lastly, we're putting that point into Ossified Essence for the more damage multiplier. For each point of essence, you have above 50 up and cast. It's just too good and works plenty well with your Skeletal Mages and your Iron Maiden to always make sure to be topped up for maximum damage. 34 points in brings us to level 25, and we're taking our Golem as a Bone Golem with a taunt to make our experience in the Capstone dungeon way easier. Together with the Skeletons and the Golem right now, unparalleled level speed. We're going to have to put him in the skill bar, and you'll never have an enemy actually touch you. 10 more points to spend until level 35 for the Capstone dungeon. That is 2 more in amplified damage for that nice and nasty multiplier. 3 in Hood Flesh, so we make sure that we always have corpses. 1 in Unliving Energy and 3 in Imperfectly Balanced. That is a slight essence increase, but 15% multiplicative damage, which works fine since Bone Spear doesn't cost much essence anyways. And the final point comes into Stand Alone. That's a bit confusing. Why would I go stand alone if I have minions? But we would just reach level 35. That means we're going to say goodbye to our skeletons. This is the time for change. They won't help you in the Capstone dungeon because they sadly just die all the time, and you get your companion plus your golem. Let's redo the skills into the gameplay loop and then the companion. First, we sacrifice our warriors for elemental bonus or the bonus critical strike chance. For Bone Spear, the bonus critical strike chance is quite nasty because it helps you to tear up those enemies left, right, and center. The Skeletal Mages will allow you to do bonus damage versus vulnerable enemies, or we're going to have just more maximum essence on cast. That also works very well with our Ossified Essence passive. Now, the 15% multiplier is definitely better if we have a source of vulnerable. We'll get to that with our companion in a second. So this is a thing. If you have the tuning stone for vulnerable, yes. If you don't, just get more essence, which is also more damage. We're also kicking out Skeletal Mage Mastery and Skeletal Warrior Mastery, which then leads us to be able to stick out Memento Mori and Standalone for even more bonuses on the more essence or the more damage and the more critical strike chance. Then we also put the point into Corpse Tendrils because Corpse Tendril with Golem together is just a nasty combination that keeps you on top and destroying your opponents. In order to make full use of Corpse Tendrils, you might as well put 2 points out of Inspiring Leader for Enhanced Corpse Tendrils and Plague Corpse Tendrils. Technically, we won't need the Vulnerable because our companion does that for us. The best part, during your leveling experience, the offensive aspect is in the Codex of Powers. And that's once the splintering aspects. Bone Spear's primary attack makes enemies hit beyond the first vulnerable. Also, Bone Shards from Bone Spear deal 30% bonus damage to vulnerable enemies. Just finish the Gulran Slums in the Dry Steppes on this waypoint. And on top of that, the second one is the sacrificial aspect from the Ruins of Eridur in Havazar for even more sacrifice bonuses. These two are more than enough to destroy the Capstone dungeon. And this is also where our companion comes in. From level 8 to 10, he'll be with you. First ability is the one with the lowest cooldown possible. And here it could be Bushwhack, Gyrate, Impale, or Slash. Right now, I think Gyrate will probably have the lowest cooldown. We know it's already 2 seconds, but maybe it will turn out one has a lower one. Shooting Stone 1 is Breaking Support. Breaking Support gives you Vulnerable. Yep, easy vulnerable source. That's amazing. Plus, there's a resource gaining with a resource support. Player gains 15 primary resource when the supporting skill first deals damage. So imagine on top of your skeletons and your curse, every 2 seconds or lower, we now get 15 resource on top to cast more Bone Spears. Lastly, there's the Swift support to have your attack faster. That should work plenty well to give us even more resource even faster. And as a boost to our character, we would go for the Flash of Adrenaline, which gives us a bonus damage boost for a duration of time, with a reduced cooldown from the tactical support, and also a enhanced duration from the duration support, so it happens longer and I get more damage for a longer time. And lastly, we could also think about Fortify support to just get free Fortify from the skill. That's quite good. Now, considering that we might want to just do more damage as well, you could swap the Flash of Adrenaline out for something more intriguing. And that would, for example, be Focus Fire, who shoots out a ray of fire to hit everyone and chain to that. This Focus Fire will get an arcing support, so it hits more targets or every target available. And with the efficiency support on top, I would gain 15% critical strike chance to the same targets hit by the fire that's chaining through everyone, having my bone spears be even more deadly. And lastly, that goes over to the registered damage support, which explodes any target hit by the skill, creating barber heart explosions left, right, and center throughout your enemies. Two viable ways for this to go. Gameplay loop with your warriors, mages, and golem is quite simple. Just send the golem in, have him taunt, max range, bone spear, curse if you want essence back, can randomly raise some skeletons to also get some essence back, curse for essence, throw bone spears in again, everything dies, do some free corpse explosion if you feel like it, and then you essentially rinse and repeat speed without ever slowing down. Throw 2 bone spears, curse again, instant essence back, explode some, instant essence back, have your dudes, tank for you. And this is for very good leveling speed that never slows down. Curse, corpse explosions, essence straight up back. You notice how simple this one is and working like super good. And this is essentially like through your whole leveling to be able to never get slowed down by anything. Now it's 35 to 60 time or 55 as you can beat the Capstone dungeon there most likely. And here we're kind of making our bone presence even more powerful. Taking Serration for your bone skill tab, bonus increased critical strike chance for each 30 essence up on cast, worth it. Also compound fracture after critical striking 10 times with bone skills, we do more damage. And then lastly, your bone skills deal increased critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies. That's where we're also going to be keeping the corpse tendrils with a vulnerable to then together with our robot always have vulnerable up, always have the damage versus vulnerable bonus. And yes, for the fight versus Elias, we're going to be keeping our golem. It's a big why not. And Bone Storm ain't here worth it. That's for later. Now Inspiring Leader gets beefed up for the max, and you can also take Death Reach bonus damage against distant enemies because our golem will be like that guy that's blocking the damage away from us. So they're distance and we can just shoot in our spears, plus getting the maximum then out of the splintering from the bone spear to deal more damage. Also, you're going to get your first Paragon points, which we are essentially going to be sending straight up in to beef us up life-wise and a wee bit damage-wise here with Amplify for bonus damage on cursed enemies, which you can very easily activate, and then you get armor damage, everything happening. Should be around Elias that you almost can put in every single point here. Very important is to actually get the glyph activated, so if you have to shirk on out here on the bottom for this, worth it. Now to the interesting level 60 to 100 part with a new gameplay loop and, well, howdy Bone Spirit. Let's finalize the equipment, everything. First, we're going to throw out the Golem Mastery and also Inspiring Leader, which gets us the Bone Spirit into Enhanced Bone Spirit, reducing the cooldown on crit, very important. And lastly, Dreadful Bone Spirit, which now restores 30% of our essence. Little did you know that this 30% essence restoration gets higher by resource generation on your rings. If you have 40% resource generation on your rings, then if you get 30% essence back, like 50 or 60 essence, depending on how much max we're actually going to be having, which is a lot, that 60 essence back is then times 40%. 3 more points are also landing in Bone Storm with Prime Bone Storm and also Supreme Bone Storm. So we get the damage reduction, but also the bonus critical strike chance to make sure that our Bone Spirit always critical strikes. Now, are we still going to use Bone Spear? No, we actually are going to have to trash it. But there's something really cool about this, and I'll show you. First, we're going to completely trash the Bone Spear, which also means that we can get rid of Imperfectly Balanced in this case, because Imperfectly Balanced just only makes the damage of core skills higher. It actually nets us 10 points. If these 10 points, 4 have to go into the Bone Spear to make this as high as possible, which has our skill bar looking like Bone Splinters, Bone Spirit, currently Iron Maiden, Corpse Explosion, and Corpse Tendrils, plus Bone Storm. Now, that wouldn't work very well because we 100% want also our pool of blood. One skill has to go for Blood Mist, and technically we could say goodbye to Corpse Tendrils, but Corpse Tendrils is just way too good considering that it pulls everyone together and allows our Bone Spirit to really get the maximum kavam out of it. Technically, it's time for Enhanced Iron Maiden to actually go with the amplified damage as well. You do not need a curse in this build, the Decrepify with the cooldown reduction ain't needed, because this one on crit already cooldown reductions enough. And even if we don't have a cooldown reduction enough straight off the rib, it only has a 10 seconds cooldown that will get even lower with our cooldown reduction on gear. But honestly, we'll make Bone Spirit almost have 100% critical strike chance with the Supreme Bone Storm and the new aspect. Which means I can now put points in Death Embrace that when I'm actually, well, close to my enemies, I do more damage and take less damage. That's fantastic. We can have Corpse Explosion now be the Plague Corpse Explosion for doing more damage against slowed, stunned, or vulnerable enemies. And yes, that one actually stacks. So if they're slowed, stunned, and vulnerable, it's even more damage. Now we're going to add Blood Mist Point, and we're going to take Dreadful Blood Mist, which also gives us a 10% bonus crit chance as you get out of it. That means we already get plus 30% crit chance alone from the Supreme Bone Storm and goddamn Dreadful Blood Mist. Plus the standard crit chance, which is at least going to be 20 to 30%. And I'm not done yet making our crit chance go higher. There's even more, which has me put our last 4 points in Bone Splinters. Yes, Bone Splinters, because they also higher our critical strike chances they're being used, and we will surprisingly actually use Bone Splinters in this build. Now, maximum essence is good, so technically the 1 point in unliving energy is what I wish to keep, and we're going to be producing essence different than with Grim Harvest, so I'd rather yoing these 2 points out to give us even more unliving energy essence. It's only 9+, but it all makes sense in the end. Now our skill bar looks quite fancy, but the gameplay loop couldn't be more amazing than it actually is. Just to give you a feeling for what's going to happen, we're going to be having a Bone Storm going on that will be permanent because of Litless Wall. Then we're going to make even more Bone Storms just by using Bone Splinters, and they will permanently be going on, as we can then Corpse Explosion or get the Corpse Explosion automatic with the Ring of Sacrilegious Souls. Now then, with the produced corpses and Ring of Sacrilegious Souls, you pull things together Corpse Tundle wise or Corpse Tundle yourself, and then you nuke in your Bone Spirit, which straight up refills your essence. And then with the Corpse Explosion happening all the way automatically, you always restore essence at the same time. You can do some Bone Splinters to then instantly cast another Bone Spirit, which only has down to a 2-second cooldown since it always crits, which gives us permanent Bone Spirit doing millions because it has 100% crit chance. And that's just the start and not even the pinnacle. Since if we're looking at the gear right now, and that's first, as we said, the Litless Wall. That one you want for Bone Storm to always be up with more Bone Storms swirling around you. And that is permanent, a bonus of critical strike chance. Now there's 2 new aspects for Bone Spirit, and they couldn't be more amazing than they actually are. One is the old aspect of Swelling Curse reworked, which gives us a bonus 25% critical strike chance on Bone Spirit, and your maximum essence is increased by 2 for each enemy hit for 15 seconds. Now if I would put the aspect of the Swelling Curse on our amulet, for example, that is then, instead of 25% critical strike chance bonus, well, 50% on top of that as well. I don't think it's actually worth it though on our neck. So let's rather put the Swelling Curse on our weapon, with another 25% critical strike chance, 20% from Bone Storm, a 10% from Dreadful Blood Mist, and then lastly, we could also think about playing Grasping Veins, which would be another 20% critical strike chance with 40% critical strike chance bonus multiplicative. Pair that together with our doing more damage versus vulnerable enemies, or in this case, it might be better to get more essence, because that 15 essence is also times 60%, so it's right, 21 essence. And our Bone Spirit is dealing 4% more damage for every point of essence. So with 21 more, well, that's actually pretty damn good. Instead of 15% multiplicative more, huh? And lastly, the bonus crit chance might not be needed. We'd rather pull up our elemental resistance higher to just be capped out. Because if your elemental resistance capped out that easily, the jewelry can just be skulls to also armor cap us out that easy. With the armor then being rubies and the weapon being most likely an emerald for more critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies. Since we don't have cooldown reductions, we're actually going to be aiming for the Flicker Step, that just in case our Bone Storm runs out, the Flicker Step with evading can higher that cooldown, because we're going to be relying on this barrier to constantly be active with the aspect of the Shielding Storm. Then we can just dive into monster packs, be undying, and then blast out our huge amounts of damage. Now we said 2 aspects for Bone Spirit, and that's the shattering aspect. Casting Bone Spirit also launches 18 Bone Splinters in all directions, dealing 400% increased damage and generating 6 essence per enemy hit. Bone Splinters are physical and a bone skill and bone damage, and we're hiring bone damage in every single way, and it's 400% bonus damage. And if you put this on your amulet, that 400% bonus damage is 600% bonus damage. Would be sad to not really use this, Ryan. One of the rings should be the Sacrilegious Souls, because that will make your corpse explosions happen automatic all the time, and your Grasping Veins as well, which allows me to instantly just cast Bone Splinters to refill my essence if needed after the ghost goes out. And that fills it up so quick that we can then straight up cast the second one, while essentially corpse explosions are happening the whole time. And since we can only cast this every 2 seconds anyways, it kind of is perfect to have the loop of refilling essence. And this one is essentially just going to delete the whole pack. Again, don't forget to pull this together, but now with the Sacrilegious Souls, we have a double pull this together. While also the Bone Storm is just doing continuous high crit damage left, right, and center. There was the thought of using exposed flesh to generate even more essence. But realistically, we're out here destroying everyone anyways, and restoring our essence fast enough anyways, to not in any way need exposed flesh. That would be the aspect of Serration, which can give us another 40% bonus damage multiplicative on top, just boosting us beyond belief. And then on the chest, I would usually say we want the Blood Artisan's Cuirass, which gives us free Bone Spirits every 5 Blood Orbs we pick up. The problem with the Blood Artisan's Cuirass has always been your only source of Blood Orb production is essentially Corpse Tendrils. That then gives you Blood Orbs, which is cool because we do Corpse Tendrils and then we do bonus Corpse Tendrils and then we do bonus Corpse Tendrils. But most of the time when you pick up the Blood Orbs, everything is dead already, and we're not really getting much to use the free cast. There is a world where after trying this out more this patch, we will actually go to play the Blood Artisan's Cuirass, but let's say for now we have a better idea, which is the aspect of adaptability. When cast below 50% maximum resource, basic skills generate 3 of your primary resource once per cast. When cast at or above 50% maximum resource, basic skills deal 80% increased damage. That is not bad, as it fills my essence up even faster for max damage Bone Spirit damage, but also my Bone Splinters just do vastly more damage as they are going away. For the helmet, we have 2 choices. I mean, obviously you would take the Harlequin Crest if you have it, but there's a thought that the Godslayer Crown might be quite nice, because the Godslayer Crown pulls everyone together every X and gives us also 60% multiplicative damage increase, which also very much works against bosses. So now we're having our Bone Spirit get 400% plus damage, and then 40% multiplicative crit damage, 30% multiplicative crit damage with the Golem, and then with the Godslayer Crown, another 60% multiplicative on top as everything is happening. Did I forget that we're going to have Flesh Eater in the Paragon board happening for another 40% multiplicative? And then lastly, with the aspect of Serration, another 40% multiplicative. And well, your Ossified Essence, which gives you 0.5% for every essence point above 50 casts, and we're going to have at least more than 60, or even at this point, 70 bonus essence happening. Oh boy. And it's more likely going to be always a crit because of the Bone Storm crit stacking. Don't forget that we have our Construct running, which gives us another 15% critical strike chance if we need, or alternatively with a Flash of Adrenaline bonus damage, while constantly restoring our essence as well, so we have even more essence for our Bone Spirit to be full essence up and cast. This makes me also think that the aspect of adaptability might simply not be needed, and that's where we're then thinking about, yes, Blood Artisan's Cuirass makes sense for the more ranks in Bone Spirit to go away like crazy. Which brings me to the point of the boots. We set Flicker Step for the bonus cooldown reduction to always have Bone Storm going on, right? The problem with the Flicker Step is that you're going to be missing boots that will give you ranks in Bone Spirit. That's a bit of a hurting one because you want the +4 ranks in Bone Spirit as well down there. And here we could then put on the Corpse Explosion aspect or the aspect of adaptability as well. I do believe, though, Flicker Step will be needed. That being said, if boss fights are happening incredibly fast, there's a chance where we could phase out Flicker Step, so put this as a maybe Flicker Step, potentially adaptability or explosive mist. Interesting for the amulet, you definitely want ranks to Macabre skills, because you can get +3 ranks to all Macabre skills. And that's what Bone Spirit is. It's a Macabre skill. Quite good, to be fair. You don't see me using Aspect of Disobedience. I don't think it will be needed because of the Shielding Storm, but also if we're putting the skulls in our jewelry, because we're beefing up our elemental resistance over the Paragon board, we should be able, with a total armor percentage on our pens and amulet, to have at least 11 to 12,000 armor, which is more than enough for the end game. Talking about the Paragon board, let's start at the bottom, bringing us right into our first node, and that is going to be with Sacrificial. You deal 10% increased damage while you have no active minions, and we're going to boost the value of these magical nodes, bringing them up to the maximum amount of armor we can get, because we just said we need more armor. 2 nodes upwards into the Flesh Eater board, consuming 5 corpses, 40% increased damage. Way too good to say no to. Turn the board twice, and we're going straight up in. If you feel like you're not having enough poison resistance and you're not resistance out much enough, you could clamp poison resistance here on the left, but I don't think we will need this. Then we're getting the critical strike damage and bonus critical strike damage. The more crit strike, the better. And the node straight away. Then also the damage versus elites plus the dexterity you see here, and the dexterity and the dex and the dex, because here we're going to actually activate the essence glyph for the 22% damage multiplier on critical strikes versus non-healthy enemies if you don't already just simply one-hit everything straight to hell. This has 34 points already happening around it, and we're going to take resistance to all elements multiple, and then we can take these 2 as well, which gives us really 44 dex in here. That's quite a huge bonus already. And then we can just leave out on the bottom side, get some more dex for even more critical strike chance to really be at this 100. I mean, we want to be at 100% critical strike chance with this build. That brings us to my favorite board, the Bone Graft. And here we're going to be quite taking a lot. And there is some fun stuff to actually take. Beginning with going upwards into Essence on Kill, Maximum Essence, Essence on Kill, Maximum Essence, and Maximum Essence. Because that's another 16 plus in total with another 8, 8, and 8. And well, if we kill something, we get Essence back. I do believe this point can be saved. We'll see if we put it back in later, but let's save it for now. Here, we're also going to put on the Exploit Glyph for bonus multiplicative damage against vulnerable enemies. And the Exploit Glyph is mainly put in here because it's so easy to just take these points of dexterity without a single hassle. I mean, I'm already having 25 dex plus without putting efforts into it. And I'll take bone skill damage, bone skill damage, bone skill damage, dex, dex, and bone skill damage anyways. This is in total 39 dex now. We can go up and take 2 more, which actually brings us to 49 dex. That's 5 more than here. So we could swap these around to put Essence on the left and Exploit on the right. Very good choices. Going to the left over the intelligence nodes into critical strike damage with bone skills, critical strike damage with bone skills, and then finally to Bone Graft itself over most of the dex nodes, but also willpower, because we need willpower to activate some of our nodes here. And then we get the critical strike chance with bone skills. More critical strike damage, and also more critical strike damage. Lastly, with Bone Graft, we have hitting enemies with bone skills increases your damage by 1% and your maximum essence by 2 for 8 seconds. Stacks up to 8% increased damage and 16 maximum essence. Wait, I mean, like I said, we're going to be at least 70 plus. I lied. We have 9 plus from the skill board. We have 16 maximum essence plus from here, another 16 from here, another 8 and 8 from there, another 8 from there. So you're going to be 150 max essence plus. And again, it's 4% damage bonus for every point of essence more you have. And then you restore 30% essence with that bone spirit, and 30% essence while you're having 150 plus essence instant full. Lastly, if you want to, and that's for the tank ability, this is one of the best nodes probably for all bone boards to take, because it gives you just so much more life and armor. Another 8%, 222, and another 50, 50, 50. It's huge. And yes, we're taking quite a lot here in this board that you could arguably say maybe we're overdoing it a little bit. But it's fine. We can now go out with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or we could go out with 1, 2, 3. Now that's a little bit more. So I'm actually going to go to the left, leave the board, into Send of Death, because Send of Death will give us bonus damage reduction or bonus damage if no corpses are nearby. And if we used up everything, or if we start a fight and there's no corpse and straight up start the fight with our bone spirit, that bone spirit has another 15% damage increase. Just first hit against the boss, 100% crit chance, one hit kill. Not only that though, we also need to go here to take crit, 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 crit. Then we get into the Send of Death and go to the left for even more crit, crit, crit. Lastly, we're going for strength, willpower, willpower, willpower. And we're actually here going to put in Imbiber, which gives us damage while we're healthy, and we're always healthy. And that multiplies it up even nicer. There's another willpower to take. Then we can take damage to injured enemies. Willpower, 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 willpower. Now, it's sad to leave away the rare node, even though damage to injured enemies won't play a role because they always die before they're injured. Alternatively, here on the right, there's also armor, 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 and armor. That's another 50, 200, 50, and 50, bringing us up to this 12,000 armor that I was talking about, because we're actually not playing Disobedience. Therefore, we gotta make use here. Now, we do have 25 points that can be used in a smart way still, especially since we're so close to just leaving this board here. Ta-da! And here's a thought: if you're playing the Blood Artisan's Cuirass, that technically the Blood Begets node for the bonus Blood Orb damage might be useful as we're potentially making Blood Orbs. Realistically, I think we have a different path to take here, and that is finding the maximum dexterity board right now. Why the maximum dexterity board? Because there is a thought of changing up this glyph exploit for, which would be Corporal. And Corporal actually hires our damage to elites quite a lot, plus the resistance to all elements. And that allows us to save quite some points here in terms of not having to take all the dex points. You just merely have to take some of the intelligence points. And well, they're just literally lying around here. That activates it quite nicely. And now we can just find another dexterity board to thief out exploit. And that is, for example, the Bloodbath board. Yep, Bloodbath board is really simple. I mean, I'm just going to be slotting in the exploit here for now. And you see so many dex nodes. I mean, let me turn this to be easily accessible right now. And you're essentially coming from the left. And I'm getting dex, dex. We get the exploit in, right? And we could go down now for the damage while fortified, but we won't actually be fortified. So would rather go just simply take these. And we have another 7 points left over. We'll take another one here right now. That is 35 in total, with 5 points left over that we could put in whatever you feel like. And here we might have to min-max quite nicely, because you can go over to the left. Let's remove this point. That's our 6 points put in. This is damage while healthy, which is its own nice little multiplier. So what we really want is 2 more points to take this. And honestly, exploit doesn't scale that well. So rather remove these 2 points to then have 2 more points, which gives us overpowered damage. Who cares about this? But in total, it can give us 6.3% damage while healthy, and 12.5%. If we somehow get the willpower up, it would be another, but that willpower is not worth it. Which then has us use only 5 glyphs. I would prefer 6. But honestly, the only other glyph being worth it is Control. And Control is useless against bosses, because that 20% damage multiplier works only when they're staggered. And I don't think that, well, we'll ever get a boss staggered. He's just going to die before. I can't wait to shower you with gameplay examples of this build because Blizzard wants this to be super S tier and we'll make it happen. If you're rather interested in Blood Super Bonanza, here's the leveling guide for it and also how the seasonal mechanic works and general level advice.